Hey everyone, Tony D and Little Joan here, a little after midnight with the last two videos of the day. Sorry, spent all day playing board games, finally just got home. But this is one of the news stories that really has defined the Trump era and why so many people are being driven out of the Democratic Party and left leaning politics in general. It's because of stuff like this. Video. Professor ties black female obesity to Trump policies, racism. Come on. I mean, this just makes zero sense. Donald Trump is not forcing black women to eat a bunch of food and not exercising and not taking care of themselves. He's just not. I'm sure Donald Trump would say that's something for them to be concerned about. Um, Racism, that's a bit of a stretch. I mean, one could argue that racist policies in the past have made black people so poor that they could only afford food that was unhealthy, maybe, kinda. But if you look at people, say, in the 20s and 30s and 40s who were poor, they were on farms and they were pretty skinny. If you were a poor farmer just eking out a living back in the 20s before the Dust Bowl era, that was before the Dust Bowl, right? You would have been skinny because you would have been doing a lot of work and you would have had very little food and money. So, why are people fat now? It's because they have access to fatty foods and a lot of free time to sit around. I know people who are heavy set. They eat terribly. They eat terribly. I had people in my family who were very heavy and ate so unhealthy. So unhealthy, Joan. You know who I'm talking about. You know family. Doggy knows the family. It's not good for you. Is that racist? What about if you're white? Is racism to blame for your fatness? Is everything everybody else's fault? I mean, this is just silly. Let's read some of her logic. Rutgers University Women's and Gender Studies professor, well, there you go, Brittany Cooper tied racism and President Donald Trump's policies to black female obesity. It seems so specific. We are living in the Trump era, the professor said, and look, those policies kill our people. A New Jersey professor suggested on a TV program that racism and President Donald Trump's policies are responsible for black female obesity. The headline, the second headline is the same exact opening statement. It's terrible campus reform. She says in the article, I hate when people talk about black women being obese, Cooper said on the program. I hate it because it becomes a way to blame us for a set of conditions we didn't create. Okay. I don't know of people who sit around and go, man, black females are obese. I mean, I've never heard that conversation, but I think if someone's very heavy and they're having a lot of trouble moving around, then sometimes people will comment like, "Oof, she's very heavy. She should watch out for her health," that kind of thing. But I don't, this to me is a straw man. I hate when people talk about black women being obese. Who's doing that in your life? Is it other black women who are talking about their weight? It continues. Quote, we are living in the Trump era, the professor said, and look, these policies kill our people. You can't get access to good health care and good insurance. Those two things don't make you fat. You get fat because you eat too much and you lead a sedentary lifestyle. Cooper said that research points to black women losing less weight and at a slower rate than do white women. claiming that public health practitioners tie increased stress to change in metabolism. Well, that may be true. But again, I'm not sure you can blame 100% of the stress on racism and Trump. I mean, people just have problems. It continues. She continues. It's literally that the racism you're experiencing and the struggle to make ends meet actually means diet don't work for you the same, she adds. Well, I've had trouble making ends meet, and I've had times when I've gained weight. Here, Joe, just come over here. I can pet you. Does that mean my fatness is to blame for my worry? I mean, that doesn't seem particularly racial if that's true. And how could it just be true for black women and no one else? Campus Reform followed up with Cooper about her appearance on the show, and the professor suggested there was a scholarly basis for her remarks. Quote, I wasn't making an argument about Trump admin policies and weight, the professor said. Dr. Arlene Geronimos research from the 1990s argues pretty convincingly that black women have psychological stress responses to racial stimuli, and this affects our long-term health. I was citing this body of work and the president's status as a racially polarizing figure that contributes to issues of racial stress for people of color. Okay, so you are accusing him and his policies of affecting people's weight. I mean, you're saying it's indirect, but I mean, you're saying it. I mean, back up what you say. I mean, if you're not making an argument about Trump admin policies and weight, well, what's your argument then? What is it? Just say it. Why do you got to be so cagey about this? Campus Reform asked Cooper how she promotes her values in her professional life. Quote, what I hope my students learn in my classroom is how to be good scholars, critically informed thinkers, able to come to well-researched and accurate conclusions, and discerning evaluators of what are credible versus less credible news sources. What does that have to do with weight and Trump and black women? I mean, you're kind of like all over the place. And this is, you didn't really make much of a point here. Okay, so you cited a study back in the 90s. What were the stats? What were the things in that study? I mean, and how big of an impact is it? Is it a huge impact? Is it a tiny impact? Are there people who don't have those stressors who are in the same exact position and don't get fat? Right? Or, how do you explain skinny black women in the same group? Are there no skinny black women in the same sort of groups? Was there? I mean, there's no real scientific basis for this other than you read a study. So you're about as convincing as me in an argument on one of these videos. I tend to use just one article or just go through one article, but you're a professor. You should be able to cite real statistics here. Something. Give us something to hang our hat on. Well, you read one study and you already are arguing, well, that's not what I said. What I said was this. Okay, so what are you saying? This is why people can't stand the left anymore. She made this argument and then she backed off of it, in my view, and now, you drill down and, well, okay, I read this one study. Okay, what did the study say? It wasn't even your study. Are you working on this? What? Or did you just come out to complain? You read this study. Okay, did you do a survey amongst your students? Did you do some sort of control group? Or Or are you just looking for somebody to blame for your own weight? You know, we're living in the Trump era. That doesn't need to be stated. And look, those policies kill our people. That's what you said. And then you say, I wasn't making an argument about Trump's admin policies and weight. Okay, but you did say that you're making an argument that the policies kill our people. So how many arguments are you making here? So, you know, I feel like when people of color make arguments about race like this, they're not challenged because people are afraid to challenge them on the subject too hard because they'll look racist doing it. And I think that's created an atmosphere in which a lot of these arguments go relatively unchallenged. There should be scrutiny here. If you have this argument, show us the results. Show us the data that proves it. Or don't make these statements. You know, it's a hyperbolic statement to say, we're living in the Trump era, and look, those policies kill our people. Do jobs kill your people? I don't think so, because Trump created a bunch of jobs. The black community is coming out in droves to support Trump. So I don't see how his policies are, quote, killing our people, your people, or our people. And I'm not sure who you mean by our people. I assume you mean black people, but maybe you mean another group. Maybe you mean women. Maybe you mean black women. I don't know. But I don't know of any Trump policies that are killing any of those groups. So this seems like an incoherent statement by someone who just wants to slam Trump and blame people's weight problem on something other than, you know, what people normally blame it on. Eating bad food, having a terrible diet, not exercising enough. So, this, I think, is a foolish argument to make. It's why people see the left and go, no, I can't support this. I can't support this argument. There's nothing to it. It just seems like a hyperbolic statement made by a gender studies professor. And that's another area of academia that seems increasingly suspect as the years go forward. Gender studies. It's just like, okay, you're studying men and women. Where's the science? This is where a lot of the leftist rhetoric come out of, gender studies. And they claim ridiculous things that aren't backed by any kind of science. And as James Lindsay and his associates proved, when they created all these fake, outrageous academic papers that got accepted by these groups, you know, there's not a lot of crucial peer review on these academics. They just make these crazy arguments and they end up in the internet, because they generate headlines. This feels like that to me. Professor ties black female obesity to Trump's policies, racism. It's a clickable thing. I saw it and immediately said, "Ooh, I got to do a video on this." But really, if you're that against Trump, you should stop doing this kind of stuff, because these are the exact kinds of articles and things that make people go, ugh, not another one of these. Not another one of these ridiculous arguments blaming everything on Trump or, you know, whomever. So stop making these racially charged arguments. Use science. People don't argue with science because science is real. You show studies and you say, here's what the studies show, and then you let people draw their own conclusion. Right, doggy? Right, doggy?